What's growing on, gardeners? It's Sunday, May 12th, and the warm weather is here on the southeastern coast of North Carolina, and that means it is melon season. And on today's video, I'm going to share with you 5 tips to grow the most amazing watermelons of your life.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the bell to receive new video notifications, and check out our Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom designed apparel and other gear. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Watermelons are definitely one of the more challenging annual vegetables to grow. They have very large fruits that require a lot of attention and food. They have long vines that need a lot of space, and they can be quite susceptible to different pests and diseases. So it is really important to understand the basics if you're new at growing watermelons before you dive in head first. However, just like anything else, once you learn the basics, it's like tying your shoes and it becomes really easy to be successful. Tip number 1 is to grow appropriately sized melons for your skill level and for your space. Now, watermelons come in all different sizes. You can get them as small as individual size, or you can get them that grow to be 50 to 100 pounds or more. And generally speaking, the larger the watermelon, the more skill and the more time it takes to grow, as well as the more space you need. That's because in order for a watermelon to get very large, it demands not only a lot of space, but it needs a lot of time and a lot of fertilizer and sunshine. So somebody that is growing monster-sized watermelons is going to have a lot of skill and time and talent to keep those vines very healthy and producing that large watermelon for the amount of time it takes. So if you are new to growing watermelons, I generally recommend that you grow smaller-sized watermelon. Something like a Sugar Baby is a really good starter watermelon because they usually only get to be about 8 to 10 pounds or so. You can even look up all kinds of personal sized melons. The smaller they are, not only the less space do you need to grow them, but the faster they will become mature, so you don't have to worry about keeping the vines free of pests and diseases for as long. So if you're new to growing watermelons, maybe this year isn't the time to try and break the 4-H Club's record. Start small, grow smaller watermelons, and as you get more and more skilled, you will gain the confidence that is necessary to grow the larger ones. Tip number 2 is something I have recently discovered, and this has become a game changer for me, and I think it will be for other gardeners that live in southern climates with strong sun and a longer growing season where it is easy to grow watermelons in terms of how many warm weather days that you have. And that is to put your watermelon bed in the shade and then plant the actual plants themselves in the shade, but let the vines crawl out into the sun. Watermelon plants need a long growing season full of very warm weather in order to appropriately mature and ripen their fruit. However, a problem that we run into in the South is eventually our days get too hot for the vines. Because remember, these are vining plants. They are not meant to grow out in full sun. They are an understory plant in their native habitat. It's just where they come from, they don't deal with frost and freeze, so they have all the time in the world to develop and ripen their fruits. We as humans have saved seed over countless generations, and we have bred these monster fruits that need a ton of solar energy in order to ripen their fruit. So as a result, we usually tag these plants to be full sun. But because it gets so hot down south and the UV index is so strong, eventually even watermelon will succumb to extreme UV. So what I have found is the best thing to do is to plant a garden bed in shade. I have this tucked away in the shade of my fig tree and my persimmon tree. And then I am going to plant these watermelons so the actual plants themselves are in shade and in relatively cool soil. Then the vines will meander and crawl out into the sun on my weed barrier. So what I will have is the core of the plants, the root structure, will be in nice, cool, shady soil, so the plants won't be stressed out. But then the vines are going to be able to crawl out into full sun to get all of the energy from the sun via photosynthesis that they need. And what you will have is incredibly happy watermelon plants, because the core of the plant, the roots, are nice and cool and not stressed out, but the vines can crawl and meander and get all of the sun that they need in order to ripen the fruit. Now, this isn't something that you're going to want to do if it's challenging for you to grow watermelons in your climate because your summers aren't long or hot enough and it's already difficult enough just to get ripe fruit. Obviously, if that is you, you want to plant these out in full sun. But if you're in the south, or you're in the desert, or you're in Southern California, California, parts of Texas, Florida, things like that, where the heat becomes too much for the vines. This is a really great hack in order to have healthy, low-stress plants that still produce like gangbusters if you have a season that is warm enough to accommodate a part-shade planting like this. I have been employing this strategy for several years now, and it works absolutely brilliantly. So just to give you an overview of my yard, here is where I'm going to plant the watermelons. They will be safely under the shade of that persimmon tree and this fig tree, and then the vines will meander out into this black weed barrier right here where they can stretch out indefinitely. You can see that we get full sun just beating down on this entire area. So the vines will be able to get all of the energy they need for the sun, but the plants are going to stay nice and cool and protected under shade. Tip number 3 is to heavily fertilize your watermelon plants. I cannot stress this enough. It should come as no surprise to anyone that watermelons are some of the heaviest feeders in our entire annual vegetable garden. I mean, in order to produce those monster fruits, the biggest fruits in our garden, they are obviously going to demand the most food. So in order to have healthy, vigorous vines that are productive and make large fruits, you are going to have to feed them like Olympic athletes. The more you give them, the more they will give back. It is very difficult to overfeed watermelons, but it's really easy to underfeed them. I have a 2-step watermelon fertilizing routine that has both a granular component and a water-soluble component. I do this every 10 to 14 days. That is the frequency that I think you should fertilize your watermelon vines, and this is how I do it. My granular fertilizing component consists of 3 different products, 2 of which are mandatory, 1 of which are optional. The base of it is always an organic all-purpose fertilizer. I'm using this Espoma Plant Tone, which is 533 NPK, but anything that is roughly around 555 will do, as long as it is an all-purpose fertilizer that is organic and has all of NPK represented and the numbers are fairly close together. That is good enough. You don't have to use this exact brand. Then I have a bone meal component, which is a big source of phosphorus and calcium, and you really need that to support blooming and fruit development as well as producing strong roots. Then I also use crab and lobster shell meal. This is optional. The reason why I plant my annual vegetables with crab and lobster shell meal is it has a component called chitin, and chitin inhibits nematode growth. And we have root knot nematodes in our very sandy soil that have been a problem for me in the past. So I incorporate this into my fertilizer because I try to chase away the nematodes as best as possible. If you don't have an issue with nematodes in your soil, you do not need to use this, although it does have a lot of nutrients and it's quite good for your plants. Now, if you want to follow my blend, I use 2 parts of the organic fertilizer, 1 part bone meal, and 1 part crab and lobster shell meal. So if you want to make 4 cups of fertilizer, it would be 2 cups of the all-purpose, 1 cup of bone meal, and 1 cup of crab and lobster shell meal, and then you mix it all up into your own blend. If you're not going to use the crab and lobster shell meal, use a ratio of 2 parts all-purpose fertilizer to 1 part bone meal. If you find bone meal too expensive, you may be able to go as high as 3 parts of the all-purpose to 1 part of the bone meal. And to make things easy for you, I will place direct links to all of these fertilizers down in the video description if you're interested. When you mix all of the granular organic fertilizers together, you get a mix that looks something like this. Now for the controversial part of this video, the water-soluble fertilizers. In addition to the granular organics that I use, I also supplement my watermelon with water-soluble fertilizers because, as I said, they are extremely heavy feeders, and we're planting the plants together in fairly high density. I believe it is just more demand on nutrition than the soil itself can provide. So I supplement the organic fertilizers with water soluble. Now, the not controversial part is Alaska fish fertilizer. I always add a watering can with about 2 to 3 tablespoons per gallon of Alaska fish fertilizer to my plants every 10 to 14 days alongside the granular organics. But here is the controversial part. Fish fertilizer is a 511 NPK, so it is very high in nitrogen, but not much else. So I need to give them additional phosphorus and potassium as well. And for that, I add a tablespoon per gallon of Jack's 20-20-20. This is J.R. Peters' 20-20-20. It's basically the same thing. This is a not organic water-soluble fertilizer. It's very similar to a fertilizer that begins with an M and ends in Grow that I would never recommend that anybody uses. But I think this is a much higher quality product. But if I had to compare it to a very common off-the-shelf water-soluble fertilizer, it would look like the one that has a big tomato on the front of the package. Now, the way I view water-soluble fertilizers like these is as follows. I view these more like a multivitamin or a supplement for weightlifting in order to supplement an already healthy diet and a healthy lifestyle to make you even stronger. So when the soil and organics alone can't provide enough for these mutant giant fruits that are planted really close together, that are usually human created. We've bred these things over countless generations. Well, this is like giving a multivitamin or some type of weightlifting supplement or protein powder after an already really healthy meal and a healthy lifestyle. So I do not personally believe that using this 1 to 2 times a month, which is really all you need to do, is going to harm your soil or your plants in any way, but it will make them grow stronger and more productive, and you will likely get a better harvest. So when it comes to growing watermelon and other super heavy feeders, I do find this dramatically helps to use every 10 to 14 days or so. Twice a month is probably enough for most growers. And again, if you're interested in the water-soluble fertilizers, I'll place links down to them in the video description for your convenience as well. Now, this raised garden bed is 8 square feet. I'm going to plant 4 watermelon plants total in here. I have 2 watermelon plants here that have both male and female flowers, and then towards the left I have some seedless varieties that I'm going to interplant later. So I'm going to give each watermelon 2 square feet of growing space. I'm going to space the plants 1 foot apart, and then they will have 2 feet back where they basically have uninterrupted space to grow in. So because we are planting in such high density, we need to feed them well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to dig 2 planting holes, and I'm going to dig them to the same depth as the root ball. We are not going to bury these deeply or anything like that. We want to bury them so basically the top of this potting mix is the top of the garden soil. And this is a brand new garden bed. I just filled it with 50% topsoil, 50% cow manure compost. So there should already be a lot of nutrients in this soil. So now that the planting holes are dug, we're just going to take the pot and make sure that they're at the right depth. They're a little too deep. That's good right there. So I'm going to take my fertilizer blend, and one of these scoopers is 1.5 tablespoons. I'm going to give a rounded scoop, which will be 2 tablespoons of fertilizer in each planting hole. Then I'm going to turn my plants upside down, squeeze the plastic so it gently falls away. Never pull the transplants out. You could tear the roots apart or break the plants. And then I'm going to orient the vines in the way that I want them to grow. The weed barrier is out that way. I want them to grow in that direction. We're going to first take our plant labels so we don't get them mixed up. We're going to do the same thing here. Orient the vines in the direction that we want them to grow. Then we are going to backfill them. So now that the plants have been backfilled and tamped down, I'm going to take a scooper and put 1 tablespoon or half a scooper around each plant. This is called top dressing, and we are going to do this every 10 to 14 days, except in 10 to 14 days, we're going to give them a full 2 tablespoons. So each plant will get 2 tablespoons every 10 to 14 days as a top dressing. That is the schedule that you will work on in order to keep these plants healthy. Now let's get the water-soluble component together to water these in. And to do that, we are going to take a watering can. This is a 1.5 gallon watering can, and I'm going to put in 1.5 tablespoons of that Jack's 20-20-20. That's a concentration of 1 tablespoon per gallon. Then I am going to take the fish emulsion, mix it up really well, and add 2 to 3 tablespoons per gallon. So since this is a 1.5 gallon watering can, we're going to do more like 3 to 4. And then I'm going to turn on my rain barrels, and I'm going to fill it with water and make sure to mix very, very well. It is very important that all of your water-soluble fertilizers have been mixed thoroughly so they have dissolved and incorporated into the watering can. Now we will apply the water-soluble fertilizer. It is very important that when fertilizing your plants, you place the granular organic fertilizers first because they are not immediately bioavailable to the plants. They have to be broken down by the microbes in the soil, and the granular fertilizers need to be wet in order to start the decomposition process. So always put the dry organics down first, then you will water them in, and that will wet them down and kick off the decomposition process. And again, we're going to do this exact process every 10 to 14 days. Now, when it comes to water-soluble fertilizers, there's enough fertilizer here for about 6 plants. You can fertilize about 4 plants this size and this intensity with a gallon. So I'm only going to give them that much, and the rest I'm going to put on my cucumbers because I have plenty left over. Tip number 4 to grow amazing watermelon is something that I discovered completely by accident 4 years ago, and that is to let the plants grow their vines on top of this black weed barrier. Now, 6 years ago, I tried growing my watermelon on a big hill, and I let the vines sprawl out in the grass. That was a nightmare. Cucumber beetles decimated and killed all of my plants. Then I tried planting it out in my garden, and I had a similar situation where I had issues with beetles and other pests that not only damaged the vines, but they damaged the fruit. However, the 4th year, I moved them into containers out in this weed barrier area when I just moved into this house, and there was a lot less growing on here. And what I found was the vine stayed completely free of insect pests all season. I don't know exactly what it is about this weed barrier, but insect pests just don't like crossing it. Maybe it's because the weed barrier attracts additional heat and the microclimate is just too warm for them. Even though the weed barrier itself does not get hot, it does make the general surrounding area 3 to 5 degrees warmer, which I have tested with a wireless thermometer. So maybe the additional heat repels them. Maybe it's something to do with the synthetic material that they just don't like walking or hopping across. I can't really explain it, but every year since, I have been growing my watermelon vines on this weed barrier, allowing them to sprawl and crawl across, and I have had absolutely no issues with pests. It's been so wonderful, I haven't even had to spray them. So my raised bed is right here. I'm going to let the vines grow over this entire area. And just for clarity's sake, there's no function to this cattle panel trellis that I have lying down here. The vines are going to sprawl across them. I want to do something with these, but I just have nowhere else to store them. This is just where they've been sitting for 2 years because I haven't gotten my big mastermind project off the ground. You don't need anything for them to trellis around the ground on. Just let them sprawl out on the weed barrier, and it will seriously eliminate the pests. Now, will it eliminate 100% of them? I don't know the answer to that question, and it may vary based on what the unique insect pests are in your given climate, but I can say right here, I've had at least a 90% reduction. I can't say it's eliminated every single one, but I can say I haven't had any insect pests kill my vines or damage the watermelon fruits themselves thanks to the weed barrier. It's the only credit I can give. And not to sound like a broken record, but if you are interested in this weed barrier, I will place links for it down in the video description. And my 5th and final tip to grow amazing, incredible watermelon, better than you ever have before, is to mulch your watermelon vines, but only after the plants have become well established. Well, why is that? Watermelons are extremely tropical. They need nights well above 50 degrees Fahrenheit in order to thrive. They also need warm soil temperatures, and they are very susceptible to rot when they are young. They do not like persistently moist conditions. And a mistake that I've made in the past is to immediately mulch my watermelon plants right after planting. The reason why you don't want to do that the moment after you plant is because the point of mulch is to retain moisture in the soil and also to cool the plants down. So if I place a mulch on top of the watermelons right now, it is going to keep the soil wetter than it should be and cooler than it should be. I want this nice black garden soil to actually get nice and hot from the sun right now to kind of give these vines a boost, because it's early May and it's just not that persistently hot right now, and it's cooling off nicely at night. I want the soil to be warmer, and mulch would actually work against me. But in about 3 weeks or so, it's going to start getting hot once June approaches, at least where I live. And when it starts getting hot, then the plants will benefit from cooler soil, and the roots will be nice and much more well established, so they will be consistently drying out the soil, and I will need the more even moisture retention. So in about 3 weeks, I will mulch this with a natural mulch. What kind of mulch will I use? It doesn't matter what kind of mulch you use, as long as it is a natural mulch that will break down and add organic matter to the soil. Do not use dyed mulch because it's usually lumber products like 2x4s, pallets, or plywood that they grind up and dye to make it look like real hardwood, but it's not. It's mostly construction scraps. Do not use rubber mulch because it's made out of tires and other yucky things that you don't want in your garden. And don't use stone mulch because stone mulch doesn't decay. It won't add anything to your soil. Any kind of natural mulch will do. Cypress mulch, cedar mulch, shredded hardwood bark mulch, pine bark nuggets. You can go rake up leaves or pine needles from the forest, and you can use that. If you have a nice lawn that is free from herbicides and weed seed tops and it's just fresh cut green grass and nothing else, you can use that. You can use all kinds of free stuff. You can go to the county and see if your county offers free mulch. It doesn't really matter what you use as long as it is natural and it will break down. And that right there are my 5 tips, my 5 secrets to growing the most amazing watermelon crop of your life. I have been incorporating these tips throughout my garden for years now, and they have all worked brilliantly, and I know that if you smartly incorporate them into your garden, they will work for you as well. Now, I know there was a lot of information in this video, so if you have any questions, please ask them down in the comments section below, and I will do my best to address them. So everybody, I sure hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and please ring that notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I used in this video, they are all linked down below in the video description, and all the other products that I use in real life in my garden, all of them are all linked down in my Amazon storefront link down in the video description. So expand that video description, click on the Amazon link, and you'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're down there, check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video.
Okay, we have skirt steak tacos for Dale's dad. We have skirt steak tacos for Dale's mom. And we have some unseasoned skirt steak for Dale. And this time, we spread the meat out. So hopefully, Mr. Handsome Pants won't vacuum it all up in one single suck. Now, Dale, wait. Oh, he's dripping. Dale, wait. I want to show everyone how good you are. He is waiting because he is listening. Okay, Mr. Drip Drool. Okay, slow down, Dale. Slow. This is a much better attempt than last time. Okay, Dale, how about we taste it for a second? Dale, you got the crazy eyes. Okay. I want him to taste it. Okay. Okay, now okay, yes. Now, Dale, I want you to finish all the juice on the bottom of the plate. Yes. Yes, you see how well trained he is? Oh, my Dale, you deserve every bit of that for chasing the bunny out of the yard tonight.